recording. Okay, this is a training video on how to get your data in SPSS and put value labels and regular labels and things like that on it, tell it what type of variables you have. So I do have two of my students here, but I wanted to record this video to share. So we will be using a fake data set today, just to keep it simple, and also we wouldn't want to put anything IRB approved on it. So let me actually share my whole screen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is open SPSS. And generally it's kind of annoyingly slow to open. It's not just your computer. It's on its own timeline. And so like with regard to versions, you don't really have to have the latest version. They're not that different. If you were doing statistical coding in it, this right now is the end of 2022 and version 28 is the most up to date. If you have 27, you can do some new features that came out this year. But if you're not doing anything really fancy, it doesn't really matter which one you have installed. So here is what it will look like when you open it. And what I'm wanting to do is get data from Excel or from a CSV into this data set. So I'm going to go, you've got kind of the bar menu, at least on a Mac, like how you would have normally. And so I'm going to go file, import data. And in this case, it's going to be Excel. So I have my data on my desktop and, oh, actually mine's a CSV. Let me try that again. So import data CSV. Okay. And so, yeah, this is a sample database. That's why it's going to be so small, but I think it's easier to get a handle on it. So right now it's telling me just, do you want to do anything kind of unusual with the CSV? Like, so for my case, no, I just want to do it normally. So I just say, okay. And so in SPSS, you have essentially, you could say, about 3 windows, depending on what you're counting as a window. This one here where the data is in is just kind of like the version of an Excel file, but in SPSS. Then if you're doing, kind of more advanced coding, you would have something called the syntax window. And then here is our output window. So I do not have my fonts on the default setting. If you are using SPSS for the first time, your fonts will be different. How your tables look will be different, but the same information will be in them. So mine just looks a little bit different. In the data view, you can see your variables. In this data set, TDCS stands for transcranial direct current brain stimulation. That is what I did in a lot of my graduate work. And you can see the variable, all of the numbers are 0 or 1. 1 means, yes, we did brain stimulation, and 0 means we did the placebo version of brain stimulation, which is very realistic. That's called a dummy variable when it's 0 and 1, when there's only 2 options. And it's highly recommended to make 1 be yes and 0 be no. And it's not very recommended to do 1 and 2. For the statistician, like we think in our brains, 1 means yes and 0 means no. We've got the same thing with gender here. And then same thing with substance use. This was meant to be yes, no. Then we have some continuous variables like a scale, and we have impulsivity and motivation. So in this Excel-like view, you actually have 2 tabs. So it's right down here. You're in the data view right now. So I'm going to go into the variable view. Okay, so it's just the other tab, and this is where you can put all the labels on your data. So Shannon and Lauren, who are in this video right now, this is what they're learning to do right now. First of all, let's unpack this. So we've got variable name here. Label generally means the actual questions asked, or if it's, you know, the score of a scale or something, you can put that's what that is. So if you were working with data where you had every single question from a survey, it would be recommended to have, you know, you'd have question 1 or whatever like that, and then you would put that actual question in. In the case of this video, what you have is more like a total score. And so that would not, we won't be putting in actual questions today. But here I'm going to put in sub means subject for me. So I'm actually not going to label that. Brain stimulation. So that means whenever I'm looking at my output, I can have an option where instead of saying TDCS, it can say brain stimulation. Why is gender coded as female? So a lot of times in a binary variable, some statisticians will label the value that's going to serve as 1 as that name. So what I'm doing here is there were no non-binary people in this sample. So we just had men and women. And so I chose to label the variable female, and 1 will mean female and 0 will mean not female. We'll show that in a minute. I'm going to call it gender. Subuse was substance use disorder. And then these, I'm just going to give them the same name. That's not necessarily necessary, but I just kind of like to do it for consistency. I'm going to put impulsivity total scale, total score. So that's how we've done the labels. And again, it would most commonly be the actual question where you'd have question 1, here's the label. But this is a different way when you're just looking at things that are not an actual question. Then value labels are super important, and let's unpack what they are. So they are like your code book. As far as I know, it could be possible, but I don't think so, that there's not a way to just import the code book where you've had in your Excel file where you've said what all the variables stand for. So you have to do it manually, at least as far as I know. So here I'm on the brain stimulation, and I'm going to click add label here. And I'm going to put in the value will be 1, and the label will be real brain stimulation. And then I'm going to put in the value 0 and put placebo brain stimulation. And so that's going to tell you basically your code book, but you don't have to refer to the code book. You have it all in here, and it will make your output easier. Oh, that would be supposed to be a number. Female, male. So you would do this for categorical variables. It's not necessary to do this for total scales. However, if you're in a kind of thing that's like strongly agree, strongly disagree, unfortunately for your workload, you will have to put in value labels I'm going to do an example right here. 1 equals strongly disagree, 2 equals disagree. And I don't have to show the whole thing, but that is what you would do. And it can be a little bit tedious, but it's just part of it. If you did your study in REDCap, it is really important to note that it can import your data into SPSS and automatically do these for you. So never, if you're in REDCap, enter it like this. Same thing in Qualtrics. It will do this for you. So ideally, most of the time you wouldn't have to do this. However, in the study that I'm training Shannon and Lauren on, we had to do paper surveys because the people in our study had a little bit of discomfort of using technology like Qualtrics. And so we gave them paper surveys, and that's why we're kind of stuck with entering it now. Now, impulsivity is just a scale. Like maybe it could be 1 means really, really super low impulsivity, and you're going all the way up. Maybe the maximum is 40 or something like that. So it doesn't have that kind of label. So you don't need to put value labels on a total score. But again, if it was impulsivity question 1, you put the question, and then you'd put 1 equals strongly disagree, and etc. Decimals, this is not going to affect anything except how you see it in your data view. Then measure is super important. And so I want to unpack what the options are. So the options are scale, ordinal, and nominal. Ordinal means you are doing ranking data. That will very rarely be the case. Especially if you're in social behavior, you could essentially just ignore that. A scale variable is like a scale, it's continuous. So, a higher value means higher on that trait. Nominal is where the numbers don't have any meaning numerically, like they're just your labels. Like here on gender, it didn't mean like 1 was more gendery. They're just your labels. So that would be nominal. So again, scale is just anything where it's like your score. And that would, from the framework that psychologists and sociologists use, be a scale variable. So what you would have for, example question, impulsivity 1, I've got the question, you would put in, 1 equals strongly disagree, 2 equals disagree, etc. And then you would actually call it a scale variable because we'll be treating it like a continuous variable. Let me delete this. By the way, that's how you add a new variable. You could just type it in just on a new line. But yes, very important to keep in mind on a general question, on a general survey, if it's like strongly disagree to strongly agree, you need to enter the value labels, but it will still be considered to be a scale. And I know I just said that, but it's so important that I said it twice. So we have now assigned value labels. And now we're going to see what that looks like in an output. This video isn't about how to analyze the data. Orta has other videos related to that. And if anybody has a request of a specific kind of video they'd like me to make regarding that, more than happy to. So email me or email Orta and let us know. But I'm going to go to do something super basic. I am going to look at frequencies. And I am going to look at one of these dummy variables. I'm going to look at brain stimulation. And I'm going to say, okay. Now you can see my output window popped up. Again, default settings look very different than this. Exact same different information, different font. My tables, how I like it, they don't really have lines. The regular one does, so it'll look different, but it's the same. And so what we can see is instead of saying 1 and 0 here on the brain stimulation, it has the actual label. And then we can see the percent from that label. So it's so much easier. And we can also see the variable name was called TDCS, but we've chosen this label brain stimulation. And so this all allowed us to see our output so much easier. And so today, my students, the part that will be a little bit tedious is they're going to copy paste in every question from this survey. And then the part that will be a lot tedious is putting in those value labels of 1 to 5. But you can see here that it's super worth it. So that kind of concludes this training. But let Ordsa know if you have any questions. Okay.